Welcome, Screen Junkies. I'm Roth Cornett. I am so delighted to be joined today by Sofia Coppola. I'm such a fan of your work.
Thank you.
This is truly exciting for me. We're going to talk about The Beguiled, which is in theaters. This is a remake of a 1971 film that is also based on the book. Were you drawing more from the book?
Yeah, I went back to the book. To me, I wouldn't want to just remake someone else's film, but the story was so interesting. The premise of this Southern girls' school where they take in a wounded enemy soldier, and I tracked down the book, which was out of print, and decided to tell the story from the female character's point of view.
So, and forgive me for not saying this immediately, but congratulations for winning a Cannes. Second female director in the history of the festival. So congratulations about that.
Thank you. Hard to believe, the history, but thank you. I'm very excited about it.
Isn't that hard to believe? What do you think the significance of that is? In sort of, we've seen these big changes in the industry in the last year or two. Pretty significant.
Yeah, I think with Wonder Woman being a hit, I was feeling encouraged, and just even my mom just made a film for kind of older women, and it's doing really well. Just the fact that, you know, that is half the audience, and it's great to be able to make movies for, you know, based on female characters and stories.
Is Wonder Woman the kind of movie that you would go see? I'm just curious.
I'm not a big superhero movie person, which is probably not surprising, but I want to take my daughter to see that. I haven't seen it yet.
How old is your daughter?
I have a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old. But yeah, I want to take her to see Wonder Woman.
Yeah, that would be great. This film, very different from that one.
Yes.
Because we have so many movies right now that are, you know, part of these interconnected universes and so large in terms of the marketing behind them and things like this. This film very much felt to me like a film that belongs in the 70s in that it really trusts its audience. It's not telling me how to feel. All of your films are very much that way.
Oh, great.
Is that sort of the era of film that you return to in terms of your viewing or in terms of...
I don't think about, I mean, that was such a great time for films, and I love movies out of that time. And there was probably less business side of going into it, where now it's such big business that it's hard to, you sneak these smaller movies in because you need less kind of input from the business side, if that makes sense, I guess. And I love movies that don't have a big message and lets the audience react in their own way. And I think when there's a lot of development into projects, when they're big budget, there's a lot of thinking about it from a group.
How many times have you been asked what Bill Murray was whispering?
Yeah, I've lost track. But I always love his answer. He said it's between them, between lovers.
Oh, lovers. Yeah, it's such a great answer, and that is interesting because I don't see them as lovers at all.
Yeah, I don't either. Either, but it's between them.
Yeah. What do you see? I mean, that feels much more to me like it's kind of beautifully non-sexual.
Yeah, that's what I liked about it, that you can have a kind of a romantic crush in a platonic way. And I'm sure people have said I have a daddy complex, but for me, it's like how I feel about Bill Murray, you know, that Bill Murray's so lovable, and it was sort of just my fantasy at that time of like, if Bill Murray would come hang out with me, and I think you can have those kind of crushes that aren't that are more platonic.
Yeah, it's funny to think of Bill Murray too as lovable, because I actually think I love him, but he also would scare me. You know, there's certain figures.
Yeah, he has a dark side too, which makes him interesting, I think.
Yeah. Well, there's actually a double feature tonight that we were talking about earlier of Lost in Translation and then going into The Beguiled. But I was saying it felt more like The Virgin Suicides would pair with The Beguiled. Yeah,
I definitely agree. And when I first saw the Don Siegel 71 version of The Beguiled, something about it reminded me of The Virgin Suicides, because it's all these girls kind of isolated in a house together, and I thought of the way we did our costumes were these kind of faded floral dresses, which kind of reminded me of the prom dresses in Virgin Suicides. But there's definitely similarities, and this one I think is I didn't feel like I was kind of just going back on familiar territory, because it's women of all different ages, and then it goes more into a genre and darker.
It's also really fascinating that I think it's dealing with women in a way that we don't really see very often, because it's about how we feel about each other, how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about men and sex all at once, which it's like, it's kind of not happening in neat little boxes. It is happening all at once. I don't know how pointed of a decision that is for you in your filmmaking, but it feels like it threads through.
Yeah, I mean, I loved the story because it's about this group of women all together, and then they haven't seen a man in years because it's the war, and they're dealing with their desire and repression and all this. So it was a fun topic because it had so much going on, and I was thinking about that because in the Don Siegel version, they're kind of crazy, and in this one, I'm trying to connect to them as humans and why they're, what it must be like for them.
The collaborations that you've had, too, with Kirsten Dunst over the years and now Elle Fanning a few times, I'm interested in the relationship between a director and actor and how that evolves. Is it just that the trust is so much there, or do you sort of try to find I wondered in watching Kirsten in particular, I wonder if she was excited to give her something totally new to play for her here.
Yeah, I love her so much as an actress and a person, and so I love working with her, and so it was fun. When I thought about this story, I thought, oh yeah, Kirsten can play the teacher, and she's so the opposite. The character is so repressed, and Kirsten's not at all, so I thought it would be interesting. I think I always like to see actors when they're playing against their type, and Elle also, she was 11 when I worked with her, so to see her as a young woman and playing this kind of, naughty, self-absorbed, kind of slutty girl. It was just fun. I knew she would have fun with it. Yeah.
She was so delightfully unlikable. And it's funny because I've interviewed her a couple of times and she's just adorable and sweet and lovely. And it just highlights what a good actress she is.
Yeah, I loved seeing her play a part that's so not like her.
Yeah.
I knew she would get it and knows that kind of girl and could have fun with it.
And there's so much that's unsaid, too, which is we don't see that a lot. Again, it's about that trust. That the actors can communicate the meaning.
Yeah, I think, and also what I liked about the story is the way that women communicate. That's very particular. The kind of how you can communicate so much with a glance or the tone. And I think men don't see that, and it's really between women. So there's a lot of that in the movie which cracks me up, and it's fun because it's just like so much in a pointed look or the tone and. So I wanted that to be, that's part of the story.
And it doesn't feel forced at all, which is also kind of nice, whereas I think there's some movies that have gone back and stripped out the dialogue as sort of like a cool experiment. But this just feels like this is how it was meant to be told. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I feel like they're really communicating that way. Like we all know that, what someone means while they give you that look. And I think there's a lot of that I wanted to really emphasize.
Oh yeah, we all know that look. It's interesting in hearing you talk about it too, because you're saying you don't really necessarily want to imbue a ton of meaning into your work, and then it's funny because the natural response is that then I want to, right?
Oh, well, I feel like I like when people have different reactions and take away what they do or disagree about it, as opposed to like I have a message and I want everyone to get that one thing.
Do you pay attention to that? Do you kind of like track at all what people are making of your work?
I try not to. I feel like it would make me too self-conscious. But I showed some friends when I was editing, and two of them started debating about like, well, did he really love her and this and that? And I was like, well, good. That's what I want. I don't want it to be clear. I want to try to figure. That's what I enjoy about films is it makes you think about things or talk about them.
Yeah, and examine your own psychology a little bit. We're such weird meaning makers. How do you choose sort of the stories? Because you do typically, I tried to trace it, it's about every 3 or 4 years, that's about how long it takes, right?
Yeah, well, I write the script and then you get the financing together and it takes a couple years, the whole process.
I was so disappointed I was hotly anticipating your version of the Little Mermaid.
It sounds so weird.
Hotly anticipating.
No, just that project was, thank you. I'm sorry it didn't work out, but it was a departure for me, and I've always liked fairy tales, and trying to do something for my daughters or young girls would be fun.
Well, do you think that would be that, or would it be this? Because I had envisioned this far darker version of it in which, the pain that she experienced and just having legs would play out.
Yeah, I mean, the story, the original story is
far
dark.
darker.
Yeah, and I think she dies. She turns into sea foam at the end. So it's much different than the Disney version that the kids know. But yeah, the original story, I always liked dark fairy tales as a kid because I don't know, they were scary and more intense. And
do you think that you would eventually ever pursue anything like that, or?
I don't have any plans to, but I mean, I would like to do. I know you watch kids movies all the time because I have kids, and so you can't help thinking like how I would do it, but I can't really see doing it. So who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious about that in general. If kind of you've been able to see this industry through so many different lenses over the course of your life, does it feel like it's in a particular phase right now where, I don't know, maybe I'm projecting a little bit, where like the rise of sort of the independent film is ready to come back?
I wonder, because when I was starting in the late 90s, it was kind of an exciting time for independent film. And then I feel like, I don't know, was it 5 years ago or before streaming became standard? It just felt like I was talking to my friend Tamara Jenkins, and we're like, I think we're all out of work. There's no one's making these movies. Nobody wants to make unusual movies. And it was very conservative. And it still feels conservative. But I think with more outlets and streaming, there's just the need for content is kind of invigorating independent film, I think.
Yeah. Do you talk about, I was so curious if you talk about that at all with your dad. Like, do you talk about the industry at large, or is it about the work and particular stories?
I think I mean, I always like hearing his studio stories and kind of complaining about that whole machine. And it's interesting to talk to him about, I love hearing his stories of, working in the 70s. And I remember I was working on this, and I said, we're waiting to get a green light on the cast. And he's like, in my day, we didn't have a green light. You just started. And I was like, okay. And I told my producer, we're just going to start, So I learned a lot from him about just making it happen.
Yeah. Well, you
can't wait for someone to tell you to start. You're just starting, and then you hope everyone follows along.
Yeah, you can't wait for permission. I think that's probably a good lesson for everyone. Do you have, is that sort of the most important lesson you may have learned from him?
Oh, I learned a lot from him, but just the way he just makes it happen, and he's so passionate, and so I think I got a lot. I learned a lot from him for that, and then also he always does it at only things he loves. Like he just has integrity about his work, and just to do things that you really care about. So I feel like I got that from him.
I obsessively, as a teenager, watched The Godfather, which is maybe a weird thing. Yeah, my best friend and I watched it almost every weekend.
Oh,
and then
God.
We would pretend that we were like, we would write lists of like who was in our pocket and who we had to take out, which is really, which is like maybe some weird version of The Godfather meets like your movies.
Or Heathers.
Or Heathers, exactly.
That's funny.
But what did you obsessively watch?
John Hughes movies, and what did I obsessively watch? I don't know. I remember seeing Breathless and thinking that was really, romantic and chic. But I love John Hughes movies. Oh, Purple Rain. Purple Rain. I saw that when I was 12, and it just like at the local theater, and that blew my mind.
How informed do you feel like you are by all of that? Do you feel like your voice is just sort of an expression? Because you were in art. I mean, you studied art. So is it all sort of coming out of you?
I feel like one of the motivating things was I didn't feel like there were a lot of movies that were really speaking to me as a teenager, and so John Hughes was so beloved because you could relate to them. Otherwise, I always felt like they were like in their 30s playing teenagers, and I couldn't really relate. And I loved My Father's Film, The Rumblefish, because he made an art film for teenagers, and I felt like I wish more people thought about having beautiful cinematography. Like I just felt like kid movies were always kind of a little bit junky, but yeah, I'm sure I was influenced. And then just my dad was always interested in, cinema, like Fellini films or Kurosawa, so he had those playing, and I don't know if I was really paying attention, but I was exposed to some film culture.
I was going to heavily read into things here for a minute because I like to do that, but there's an element too in the unspoken. There's like an element of voyeurism, which is in all film, right? But I really feel that element of voyeurism present in your films, and I wonder if I don't know if that comes from your experience in a way of sort of being a person that is observed a lot throughout life.
Oh, I never thought about that, but I feel like an observer
you
also.
Do.
Yeah.
Both.
Yeah, I feel like I'm kind of inside of things, but observing some kind of combination. I don't know. But I think as a person that's a writer, you tend to be an observer and kind of watching things. But I don't know, isn't everyone maybe?
An observed and the observer?
I mean, an observer, like, yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. I wonder if that's just introvert, extrovert, you know?
Yeah, I'm an introvert.
Yeah, me too. So I feel like an observer.
Funny you can host a show, but
it's all totally fake. If you put me in a cocktail party, I would die. Oh. I would literally die in a corner and cry.
Really? Yeah. That's so interesting.
Are you good in a cocktail party?
I'm okay. I'm better at that than like public speaking.
Really? Okay, well, we can do that. We can just stand in for each other. I'll send you to the parties. Yeah. One of the things I really love about this film in particular is how distinct the characters are.
You know, as making a film, you try to make each character really human, and I try to connect them to someone I know or qualities. So I think just because I'm trying to relate to, put myself in each character, so thank you. You know, I want them to really feel, you know, because there's such a group of them, I didn't want them just to be a blob of women. Yeah. I want each one has a individual personality, and then the actresses bring that too. And
they're all kind of, in a way, I think it could be perceived as cast against type. I mean, not overtly so, but right, like with Elle Fanning, she's so light and sweet, and she's just so in this movie. And
I think it helped to have like really clear ideas of some of their backstories. So I knew there was something in the book about her mom was always looking for a rich husband and taking her to, you know, find a man. I feel there's certain women that's part of their agenda is like being attractive to men. Where, like, so I was thinking about her having stories and relating them to people you've seen or something. I thought helps.
Did you bring them back to the book?
I sent out like a little chapter about her, but I didn't ask anyone to actually read that book. You don't need to.
Just little chapters about. What did you give to Nicole Kidman?
I talked to her about the character, and then there were some journals of women during that time, and also the etiquette book of that time was really interesting because it had a lot of rules and manners about like how to be attractive to men and don't say thank you because you don't want to encourage compliments, and they're so funny because it's so dated, but it does tell you how women were expected to be at that time.
Don't say thank you?
Yeah, because you don't want to be like encouraging a compliment.
Wow. Yeah. I actually think that's not dated.
Yeah?
Yeah, because I'll test it. Go and give 10 ladies a compliment tonight and watch them demur. And say, no.
It's funny because I remember James Woods, who I worked with on Virgin Suicides, he complimented me and he said, like, oh, just say thank you. Women never say thank you. And I remember that staying in my mind. And
now you say
like,
thank you?
Accept a compliment.
Colin Farrell's character is also really richly and beautifully drawn because I went through such an emotional, and this was great because I felt like I was in their position. I went through such a roller coaster with him.
Oh, cool.
Where I empathized with him and I didn't trust him, and then I was very angry.
Oh, good. Oh, great. Yeah, I didn't want them to be too black and white, and that's what you hope for, that you can't quite figure them out, and especially his character, that he's charming and he's kind of like this wounded puppy, but then you don't know if you can quite trust him. So, and I think because Colin is so likable that he brought a lot of his own charm and charisma to it. But I hoped that the character you couldn't quite figure out, and it shifts as the story goes on.
Do you reference things like when you were sort of creating the look of the film, are you referencing paintings or things from the time, or how are you finding that?
Yeah, I looked at paintings with Philippe Lesourd, the cinematographer, when we talked about the lighting, and watched other films. I watched The Innocents with Deborah Kerr, just for the kind of style of that kind of genre, and Picnic at Hanging Rock, which was something that I referred to in Virgin Suicides, that kind of aesthetic, and a lot of photography and portraits of the time. When we worked in the costumes, we looked through Civil War portraits and the clothes and the hair, and you know, kind of edited through what we thought would look appealing to a modern eye.
It's funny you were talking about streaming and kind of how that, I agree with you, that actually can help independent film now. I think there's some level of resistance to, does a film have to screen in the theater, or is it okay if it goes on streaming? Yeah. Do you have a strong feeling about that?
I really hope people see my films in the theater, and I just love the experience of going to a theater. When I go to a theater, thank you. When we shot this, we really thought about like when you see it on a big screen. So I'm like, oh, I don't want to think about it as on a small. I hope people see it in a theater, and just the communal aspect, especially this movie. I think when I see it with an audience and people laugh and get freaked out, it's so fun to experience with an audience, and I think more and more we have good setups at home, and it's hard to get to a theater, but whenever I do, it's such a different experience. So
episodic television now is so different than it was in one day, and there's these limited series that you can really dive into an interesting story know if you've seen Fargo on FX. So
I saw one with Kirsten, but I didn't watch the whole thing. But yeah, I would like to see the whole thing. But I think it's exciting that you can play around with time, and you could do something that's 6 hours long or even 20 minutes long, where when I was starting, you couldn't really make a short film. There was nowhere to show it. So in that way, I think it's interesting.
Is it something you would explore?
I don't have any plans to, but it is. I mean, I like watching some of those series, and it's fun to think about what you would do with it. But I don't know, all my ideas so far are so they're short. Like I can't imagine doing something that was longer, but it's interesting to think about.
Well, you could do the Valentine's special with Bill Murray.
It was supposed to be a Valentine's special. Yeah, that was the it was in the beginning. It was a Valentine's special, and then it got later in the year and turned into Christmas. So the original idea was him singing love songs.
Oh, let's make it happen, Netflix. Okay. I love that special.
Okay, we'll work on the Valentine's special because, thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to see whatever it is that you do next. I'm certainly excited to see it. Are there filmmakers you're excited by right now and that you're loving?
Yeah, I love that movie, Force Majeure, the Swedish film, and Ruben Östlund just won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, so I'm excited to see his new movie. And what was the movie that Salma Hayek did? That Beatrice at Dinner. I just heard about that, and you haven't seen that?
I haven't seen that one.
I'm curious to see that, and I
saw most recently the two that I saw this summer were your film, Beguiled, and It Comes at Night. That both felt like that to me, where I was very refreshed.
Oh, great!
Because look, I love all movies, obviously, but sometimes you feel like you're being battered with films that are telling you exactly how to feel every second.
Yeah, too much development. Yeah.
Very, very refreshing. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Go see The Beguiled in theaters. It's so beautiful on the 23rd of June and beyond. Click here for more awesome Screen Junkies news and click the logo to subscribe.